Something very helpful at the start of learning anything is to agree on the definition of certain terms. And hopefully with the first lesson we had, you understand that the word sabermetrics, especially when you look at the dictionary definitions, is not exactly clearly defined. The definitions aren't in sync. And in the pursuit of trying to define the word sabermetrics consistently through this course, I like going back to the original source, a good definition that we all can use going forward. In the 1981 abstract, Bill James writes this: sabermetrics, by its nature, is unemotional, non-committal. And these words are very objective words. So Bill James starts out by using some objectivity in his definition of sabermetrics. Also, in his 81 abstract, he wrote that good sabermetrics respects the validity of all types of evidence. In his 1984 abstract, Bill James writes this: I'm sort of a baseball agnostic. I make it a point never to believe anything just because it is widely known to be so. I love this quote from Bill James because what he's talking about here is a healthy dose of skepticism. Bill James is a skeptic in the best sense of the word. He doesn't just take the conventional wisdom and decide he's just going to follow it. He decides to ask questions himself and try to understand things better for himself. In an article written by Bill James in 2014, he writes the following: sabermetrics invents ways to address the big picture questions. Sabermetrics is not about who is better than who or where players should be rated. Not at all. It is about why teams win and how the game changes and why the game changes and how the game works. So what Bill is talking about here is the why teams win, the why the game changes, why the game works the way it does. He's asking big picture questions, the why, the how of the game. So that's what Bill's pursuit of knowledge is about. He wrote this in March 2014 on his website. Now these words, objectivity, skepticism, not believing the conventional wisdom, having big picture questions, this sounds an awful lot like science. Science is the pursuit of knowledge. The pursuit of knowledge through observation and experimentation. And I want to review some more quotes from Bill James that are interesting, that relate to this question of what the definition is. In 1989, he published a great compendium of his work up to that point called This Time, Let's Not Eat the Bones. One of the things he writes is, I wanted to be a baseball scientist. He also said, I decided to call the science of baseball sabermetrics. The science of baseball was called sabermetrics. And finally, he wrote, what I write about was sabermetrics, the scientific study of baseball. After over a decade of writing his work in 1989, he's trying to summarize it in this book, and he refers again and again to sabermetrics as a science, the science of baseball. What the OED emphasizes in its definition of science is an intellectual activity, a systematic study of the physical and natural world through observation and experimentation. My favorite definition for sabermetrics is the study of the game of baseball through observation and experimentation. Now, the reason I put the clause where applicable on experimentation is you can't always do experiments in the game of baseball. Most of the time, you're just going to be an observer. Experiment, by definition, means the experimenter manipulates the situation. And that's awfully hard for us to do as observers of the game of baseball. So, in baseball, as sabermetricians, we observe the game, we observe it carefully, we use measurements, and we use data that we collect to better understand the game to answer big picture questions about the game. So most of the science of baseball, most of sabermetrics is actually observational science. Sabermetrics is the scientific and objective analysis of baseball. It's nice, it's simple, and it gets to the point about what sabermetrics actually is. And this is essentially what Bill James has been writing about and arguing for since the beginning when he started writing about baseball. Now, clearly, the dictionaries don't have this definition of the word sabermetrics, but a lot of sabermetricians prefer this kind of objective analysis of baseball definition, the scientific, objective, dispassionate, big picture questions about how the game works. So this is the definition we'll be using as we proceed in Sabermetrics 101.